Hi everyone, it's Darlene. Welcome to the first video in my series called One Stamp, Four Designs for Mediums. I will be using this stamp set, Spring Flowers by Simon Says Stamp, to create 4 different cards over 4 Fridays in the month of January, and I'm going to use a different medium each time. This first card that I'm going to create today was made using Copic markers. So here is the stamp set. It has a lot of really pretty flowers and it's got these dotted sort of flower petals in between. I've already cut some masks and cut them out of Post-its, and I just stuck them to the back here, and I'm going to use them later when I'm ready. Some other products I use for this particular card are the Stitch Circles by Simon Says Stamp, the second one in from the outside. I used a U die cut and this Altenew UR set. I'm going to start with a piece of Neenah Solar White cardstock cut to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and I'm going to mark the center of this piece. So what I'm going to do is take my T-square and I'm going to mark the 2 3/4 mark across, because that's half of 5 1/2, and then I'm going to flip it 90 degrees and I'm going to mark 2 1/8. So where those 2 points cross, that is the center of my cardstock. The reason I'm doing this is because I want to make sure that my circle is centered in the middle of this piece, because then my flowers won't look symmetrical. So you can see I'm rotating my T-square and drawing a straight line across right through that middle center point that I created. And now I can take my circle die, which has those little nubs on it that that were used to connect the dies when I first got them, and they're exactly at 12, 3, 6, and 9 o'clock. So I can just line those up with my pencil lines, and then I know that my circle is in the center of this cardstock. So I'm going to take a pencil and I'm going to mark the circle on the inside. That way I know I'm for sure putting my flowers on the inside of that circle. And then I can erase those long pencil lines because I don't need them anymore. I'm going to use my MISTI to stamp these flowers. So I have 3 flowers I'm going to use, so I'm going to put 3 on one side of the circle and 3 on the other. So I'm positioning them so that the same flower can be on the opposite side of where it is right now. So I have all 3 of them. I'm going to close this, get them on the lid, and then I'm going to flip my paper over to make sure that they will also align correctly on the other side of the circle, and it looks like they will. So I'm going to put this back in the MISTI. I'm going to ink this up with some Memento Tuxedo black ink because it works best with Copic markers. And then I'll stamp it down right on my circle. And so I have placed these flowers just a tiny bit inside the circle, like maybe a millimeter or 2. So once I got that stamped, I can flip this over and then ink up those same stamps again. And then I will get the exact inverse, and it should cover the rest of my circle. And then I can have everything be symmetrical. Now you could do this randomly, but these flowers are kind of large, and I thought it would look better aesthetically if they were symmetrical. So now I'm erasing my pencil lines, but I actually shouldn't have because I forgot I still have to stamp the leaves. So I put my Post-it masks over the flowers, and I only did 1 for each flower, so I'm going to move them around as I need it. You can see that there are 2 leaf stamps, and I'm going to use the small one on the top and the bottom because I don't have as much space, and then I'll use the large one on the left and the right at both the top and the bottom. I'm going to make it so that that big middle leaf kind of sticks out between the 2 flowers. Now that my stamping is done, I can color. So I'm going to start with the side flowers, which are going to be red, and I decided to color the dotted area first. So it's a little confusing with these flowers with all the different lines that make up the flower, but I'm going to color these 2 dotted areas first as if they are real petals for this flower. I have R29 and I'm flicking it upward, and so you're starting at the bottom and flicking toward the top, and with a little bit of practice you get kind of a light feathery look at the top. So then I'm going to take R24, it's just a medium red color, and I start about halfway into the R29 and flick upward in the same way to extend that color upward. And then I'm going to take my R22, the lightest one, and I'm going to flip my cardstock over because I like to flick upward, and I want to make sure I get a nice clean line at the edge of the petal. So I just colored it in solid with the R22, and then I flicked upward to fill the space. Now for these first 2, I really didn't leave much white space between the R24 and the R22, but you'll see that I do that with the next few petals, and I really like that look. So once I get those dotted petals done, I'm going to move on to the solid ones, And I'm doing the same exact thing, except I'm going to work around the petals I just colored. So that way it looks like these dotted petals are in front and they're casting a shadow on those back petals. So you're really just going to color your darkest color around the petals that you just did. And I'm using that same flicking motion going upward. And it's important to continue to rotate your paper so that the petals are facing sort of away from you and you're coloring in the direction of the petal, where the petal is kind of perpendicular to you and you are flicking upward. And that way the veins of the flower are going to be according to what each petal direction is. And so you want to make sure you do that so you don't get any flicking to the side or anything like that. And so the petals look really pretty and consistent. I'm not really paying too much attention to the order of these solid petals, like which ones are in front, which ones are in back. Just so long as I have those two dotted ones in the front that look like they're in front, it's going to give me plenty enough dimension and perspective that it's going to look nice and pretty. All right, now I'm just finishing up some R24, just flicking upward, starting about halfway into that R29. And now I'm going to flip it over and color the edge solid, and then I'll flick in the opposite direction. And this time I'm going to leave a little bit of white space between the R22 and the R24, because I think it just gave it a little bit more of a realistic feel. I'm going to color the flower on the opposite side of this flower with the same colors and the same technique. It'll take about 30 seconds and I will be right back. All right, that finishes up the red flowers. I'm going to move on to the next ones, which I decided to do pink. And I really don't have a lot of pink markers. So I kind of had to make do with what I had. So I am using RV19, which is kind of a dark purplish pink. And then I have RV14 and RV13. And you can see I'm just speeding through this because I'm doing the same exact technique that I did on the red flowers. So I started with that dotted petal in the middle. There's only one on this flower, so I colored that completely with these three colors using the same flicking technique. And then I just flipped it over to the other side and I'm doing the same flower the same way. I'm also being careful to leave a little bit of that white space between the RV13 and the RV14. I really like the way that adds the textured look to these flowers. To get that light feathery look at the top of the lines when you're flicking upward, you want to also kind of pick your pen up from the paper as you're flicking it upward. So I would encourage you to practice a little bit. Once you get the feel for it, it's really easy to do. For my final flower, again, I don't have a lot of oranges, so I have wire 09 and wire 04, which I've used together a number of times. And the YR00 is probably a little lighter than I would have liked to use on this flower, but it was all I had, so I'm just making do. And I could have created like another color by combining and touching tip to tip and things like that, but I thought this one would be, fine. So I just used that YR00. And you can see I'm doing the same exact technique. There are two dotted petals on this flower, but they're really, really tiny. So I sort of almost had to finish one, complete one, because it was so small on that right-hand side. But one of them is kind of curved over, so you want to be careful that you get your shadow still on the right side of that curve. And you want to make sure that you're still flicking upward. It's a little tricky with that one, but keep those flicks in the direction of the petal. I did the leaves all the same color, YG17, YG25, and YG21. This YG21 is pretty much a yellow. It doesn't really look very green, but it really added a nice highlight to my leaves. Again, using the same technique I used on the flower petals with the three colors. And so I'm going to fast forward the rest of these leaves. They go by pretty quickly, and I'll be back. Okay, so here is my finished coloring. I really like the way the bright colors turned out. Now I die cut this U die out of some black Stampin' Up! Cardstock, and I grabbed it with my tweezers and my two-way glue pen. I'm just going to dot it on the back, and you can see I used scratch paper, which is why it was pink on the back. And I've die cut that circle with that stitched circle set by Simon Says Stamp, and then I'm going to put that right kind of in the center, but a little upward because I'm going to use that sentiment underneath. This is the Altenew You Are set. It has a ton of you are. So you are awesome, you are incredible, you are amazing, you are capable, you are the best. There's so many, and so they work great with this U die cut. So all you have to do is cover the U, since you already have the U with the die cut. I covered it with some surgical tape, and so I'm going to ink it up with my Memento ink. It just happened to be the black ink that was on my table at the time. And so once you get your stamp inked, you can remove the surgical tape, and that way the U won't stamp, just the rest of the sentiment. So I'm going to put it right there underneath in the space below the U, and that will be done. So I'm going to put some Scotch foam tape on the back, just a few pieces there to pop it up in the middle, and then I'll center it right there in the middle of my flowers. So it's a pretty simple look. Since I've done a lot of coloring, I wanted to do the rest of the card pretty easily. And finally, I'm going to flip this over. I'll put some tape runner on the back with my ATG tape runner. I'm going to adhere this to a piece of Neenah Solar White cardstock that's cut 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, the A2 size. And so I don't really have a mat on this, and I wanted to keep it that way, nice and clean, not too many dark colors, and leave it nice and bright. So anyway, that's the card for today. I hope you enjoyed that video, and I'll be back next week with another card that uses this stamp set. Thanks for watching.